What's up, guys? Welcome to the Arcane Mage Tips and Tricks Guide, updated as of 5.1. So this is pretty much going forward. There are a couple different theories that have been out there so far about the Arcane Mage, different ideas, different best practices, etc., etc. There's been a lot of testing since 5.1 because everybody used Fire and nobody played Arcane, to now everybody's playing Arcane and nobody's playing Fire. So there is still a little bit of theory testing going out, but I did want to bring you a video because it is important that you understand kind of where the mage is. Right now, Arcane and Frost are extremely viable in PvE. Arcane does come out ahead, not by a ton according to Simcraft, but by a significant margin, enough to where it's the top DPS out there right now. I do not know how long Frost will be viable or what gear is dependent on that spec being viable. This guy that I'm going to be playing with, I'll just kind of show you exactly what he's wearing real quick. You can pause it and scroll through. I do have my 2-piece with a Raid Finder piece. It was a bit of a downgrade for my shoulder piece, but it gave me my 2-piece bonus, which is actually really good. Fully upgraded weapon. I just got my trinket last night. And so that's kind of the gear I'm wearing. I'm about 490 eye level right now. Everything that I've researched, right now the biggest controversy with mages is going to be how you stat, how you allocate stats. There's a big debate between mastery versus int, and I believe, just from looking at some of the top mages in the world, such as Blatty, and looking through some of his live streams, looking through some of his theory crafting sessions that he has on Twitch, also going over his armory, going over some other mages' armories, and going through some of their videos. The main debate right now is whether you want mastery build or whether you want int build, and for me personally, I think the int build is better. Now, you may tell me I'm wrong, and again, this is just my personal preference of play style, but on my WoW Heroes, I've done quite well with my rankings considering my gear level. Like I said, I just got my relic not my relic, but my Light of the Cosmos last night, so I'm curious to see going forward how much that increases my DPS, considering I had a blue crap crit trinket, which for Arcane is completely worthless. So I'm curious to see exactly where I end up number-wise, and again, I'm not in like overpowered gear by any means, but I am still making quite high rankings, and so I believe personally that the int build is better. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, what are you talking about? Let's start from square one. It's all about, what you're doing as far as your stat weights, right? Since Kata, or after Kata, when they implemented the Mists of Pandaria changes, they made the secondary stats worth more to the point where, 2 crit might be greater than 1 int. Like for fire mages especially, that was true. If you had crit, the more crit, the more procs, the more damage, etc., 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 it made sense. Now, you didn't forego int altogether, but all of your gemming and everything else was primarily crit hit, crit expertise. That was just the way that you gemmed. It was not int crit. Pretty much the rule of thumb with that was pick one side or the other, and that's what I'm going to tell you with Arcane, is pick one way or pick the other. Do not go mediocre in between. So what you need to do is, if you're going to gem for mastery for Arcane, gem for mastery. Mastery hit, mastery expertise, whatever gems mastery has, you want to do that. You don't want int gems. If you're gemming for a mastery build or you're going for a mastery build, that's what you want to do. What does our mastery do exactly? Increases all spell damage done by up to X% based on the amount of mana the mage has unspent. Obviously, the higher your mana, the more damage, and mastery will just flat out buff your damage. However, my theory on this is mastery does not increase your spell power, okay? Int does. Int makes everything hit harder. So my theory is if your base damage hits harder, then your mastery on top of that will add better. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, let's say you have 20,000 spell power, for instance, just a nice round number, okay? Well, with your mastery build, if you're at 100%, you have 50% mastery, let's say, and you're at 100% mana, well, now you're doing what? 30,000 damage, okay? As opposed to if you have, let's say, 15 or 10,000, well, it's not going to be that bad, but like let's say just 15,000 spell power, okay? And then you times that by 70% mastery. Do you see what I'm saying? Like you're only at 23. So that's my theory, is the higher your base spell power scales, the higher your mastery scales exponentially. Do you understand where my theory and logic is behind that? And again, if you guys think I'm wrong, or if you guys have seen different builds or whatever, please feel free to leave a comment below. But I wanted to at least go over that because that's how I base my build, okay? Is what am I doing? Is my mastery, that's just how I look at it. Is my mastery, yes, it's important. The other thing that you have to remember, guys, with the stat weights is expertise counts as hit, so keep that in mind. You do have to get to the hit cap. That is the most important stat. It doesn't matter what your int or what your mastery is. You have to be hit capped as Arcane because every single spell needs to hit. It will destroy your rotation if you miss. It will absolutely destroy it. And it's very hard to recover from misses, especially with the amount of damage that our spells do and with the amount of movement that we need to take advantage of, okay? Your haste, it increases your spell casting, but haste also increases your mana regen for Arcane. Haste is extremely important. I've seen people gem and go pure haste. I don't believe that's right because I feel like at a certain point you are losing power, whether it be through mastery or int, just to sacrifice your casting, your mana regen. But also remember that every piece of haste that you get also increases your spell casting. So is it really that big of a deal? At what point does it become diminishing returns? Everything that I've read is around anywhere from 3056, which is your break point for your Nether Tempest, or about 3300, 3400, right around in there, just to keep yourself safe, and it gives you a little bit faster spell casting. That's kind of the range. So pretty much if you're above 3100, below 3700, 3600, right in that range, you should be okay. Again, it's personal play preference at that point. How comfortable are you with your rotation, etc. That's just pretty much how it works. And like I said, so it's going to go int or hit. And then for me, it's int, haste to, like I said, I do around 3100, only because I don't really care about my casting speed. I care more about my dot having that extra tick. After that, I don't feel like sacrificing more haste for mastery. So how I do it, again, is hit to the cap, int, haste to 3100 roughly. I think it's 3056 is the exact number. Then mastery, then more haste, then crit. Okay, that's pretty much how it goes. And again, like I said, if you have a bunch of haste pieces, like especially if you went from fire, you have a bunch of crit haste pieces. Understand that even though you might, and that's the crazy thing, is when I first switched, I was purely gem, purely enchanted, purely everything for fire, right? And I haven't really won that many pieces. I got like a belt and a trinket, and I just pretty much switched everything to mastery. So mastery on my actual base gear isn't where it should be. So understanding that part, the numbers that I'm pulling still is incredible compared to somebody, let's say, who's been gearing for Arcane the entire time. That's going to be the difference, is once you get that more optimal secondary stat gear, then we'll really be able to test it a lot better. But like I said, there's not really anybody out there who has been doing this, so it's kind of a interesting limbo of where mages are. But that's your stat weights, guys. That's just what it is. It's hit, int, haste to your breakpoint, mastery, more haste, then crit. Crit is practically worthless for Arcane because again, our main rotation, and I guess this will bring us into rotation, okay, is what are we doing for rotation? Well, first off, let's look at talents. We'll go through these real quick. Presence of mind, obviously, if there's no movement, take that. The nice thing about ice flows, guys, is it allows you to not let your stacks fall off while you're moving. So if you're moving into a different place to put another rune down, sometimes you have enough mana to where you don't want to reset all your stacks yet. Ice flows allow you to, cast arcane missiles, cast arcane blast, or cast arcane blast, and it also allows you to put down rune of power, all while moving. So keep that in mind, that it does have quite a few advantages, especially for Arcane. Scorch, I have not run into a fight where I needed Scorch as a Arcane Mage yet. And I'll get into a little bit of that in a minute. Ice Barrier, Blazing Speed, Temporal Shield. Actually, Blazing Speed does become somewhat viable for Arcane because it allows you to get from point A to point B very, very fast, allowing you to lose less time between casts, etc. So it actually does become a little bit better for Arcane. But again, I go default Ice Barrier just because of the monster absorb that it does. Ring of Frost, again, this tier is your discretion. Cauterize, I use in this tier. There are fights where I will use Cold Snap. I don't really ever use Greater Invis. That's just me, just because of the length of the cooldown. Cauterize is pretty much my permanent one, just because if a healer messes up, it allows me to Ice Block and wait for them to figure out what they just did. Cold Snap obviously will, like your CC. So like for Su Long, I love Cold Snap. That's my favorite talent in the world. Is if push comes to shove, oh crap, this side needs help. Blink over, freeze everything. If it's on cooldown, Cold Snap, freeze everything. I'm never worried about CC with Cold Snap. In your dots, I use Nether Tempest. It deals arcane damage, so it's kind of just made for you. There's a lot of fights where you're pretty much just single target. Pretty much every single target fight, Nether Tempest wins out. So there's really no reason to not use it. The only fights where I've seen, is like Living Bomb on Windlord is a better choice, or Frost Bomb, or whatever it is you're using. Anything that has more of a multi-target thing. For level 90, there is no choice. Rune of Power is what you want. If you're using Invocation, you're not using a Mastery build, because if you're using Invocation on a Mastery build, you're doing it wrong. The whole point of the way that Arcane Mages have been buffed is you want to keep yourself at 80% plus mana at all times. That is your biggest thing, is as an Arcane Mage, is movement management and is mana management. It's how can I move the least, how can I keep my rune up the longest. Those are, and how can I keep my mana above 80%. Those are pretty much all you're worrying about during a fight. You're really not worrying about your rotation because it's incredibly simple, as I'll show you soon. Glyph-wise, this is just what I was using for the last fight I was in. Again, armors, evocation, and mana gem. Evocation is extremely important, guys, because when your rune's down, you're gaining 1% health. It makes your life, it makes mages in most raid fights the least amount of a healer's worries. And from being a former healer, I just like this because it makes my life a lot easier. Arcane Explosion for AoE fights, good talent. Arcane Power, I do not like this talent. It is just for Arcane. It increases the duration of our biggest cooldown, but it also increases the cooldown of that by 100%. And the problem is already with the way that Arcane Power works, and with Alter Time, it allows for a nice steady flow without you dropping too far under that mana. You can pretty much stay where you need to be with mana with the current way that it is unglyphed. If you glyph it, you will find yourself dropping well below 80% mana unless you get extremely lucky with Arcane Missile procs. And then it becomes a DPS loss because of the fact you have to wait so much longer for the cooldown to come up, and because it drops you below the mana where you're trying to stay. So that would be my suggestion there, okay? The other one that I'm using is Mana Gem, just because I don't like to cast this thing a lot, and it costs a ton of mana, so you don't want to be in the middle of a fight and realize you don't have any gems. So I do use that one. The other one you can use is Fire Blast. Will spread your dots, obviously, for AoE fights. An extremely good talent. I use Armors also, just because of the added defensive effect of each of them. So that's what I'm using right now. Fire's Miners, Mirror Image, Momentum, Mana Gem. This one is actually a decent one for Arcane, guys. There's actually a minor glyph that's a decent upgrade. It allows you you can macro, like I have my Alter Time, my Arcane Power, and my Mana Gem all macroed together, so that way when I hit them, it allows me to get an extra 6 seconds of that Mana Gem. So it's pretty much a 12-second Mana Gem. I'm actually getting 40% back, which makes that a DPS increase. I recommend playing around with that, making sure you macro it properly, because once you get it to work right, it really will increase your DPS a ton. So I recommend checking that out. But let's get into what I was talking about before, okay? The biggest things that you want to worry about when you're an Arcane Mage is knowing the fight. You have to know the fight extremely, extremely well. I know I preach this for pretty much everything, but for Arcane, it's actually a difference. As a fire mage, you have mobility. You have abilities that will allow you to still do incredible DPS on the move, incredible utility, incredible AoE. You can do a ton of damage as fire you used to be able to while on the move. With Arcane, you are a single target truck, okay? You can literally, if it comes down to a patchwork style fight, if you're doing your job right, no one can beat you in equal gear. I'm telling you now, they cannot do it. It will not happen. If you're doing your job right, they cannot beat you. We are the #1 spec, okay? You're on top of the meters. Where you see Arcane Mages fall off, and the reason they're at the top of the meters is because 99% of the time you have to move during a fight. This is where Arcane becomes extremely, extremely tricky, and this is where the entire spec comes into play, is again, mana and movement management. Those are the two biggest things you're worrying about. I'm going to go through the rotation really quick. As you see, I have my tell me when, telling me when that's up. My buff frames are telling me how long my rune of power has before it expires. Okay? And you can have two down at the same time. Now, I like to put them apart so that way I can just blink into the other one. If I need to run back, I can run back. But that way I have them both down. So at the beginning of the fight, I normally place both of them down on the ground. I don't know what this dumbass is doing. So anyway, so let's do a single target here. I'm just going to throw one down here. First things first, get your bomb up, right? Make sure you're always in your rune of power. Get your bomb up. Start spamming your Arcane Blast. The only time you want to cast those missiles, guys, is when you get... If you get 2 of them, cast them. Otherwise, as soon as you hit 5, bam, 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 bam. We're up at 6. We're at 100% mana. Get our mirror images out. Pop our macro. And again, before our macro expires, we want to throw out that big Arcane Barrage and reset our stacks because it does so much damage, and then we're going to reset back to 6 stacks. So count down in your head to 6 seconds. And then, like I said, you're just watching your mana at this point. Every time you get an Arcane Missile proc, use it because it allows you to regen a ton of mana. See, I'm at 90%, 85%. I'm still sitting good at about 90%. I got to refresh my dot. Uh-oh, 84, but I got an Arcane Missile proc. Okay, we're still good. And this is literally, guys, how long you can keep going with the same spell. Okay, your rotation's not... Okay, now I'm below 80%. Bam, pop my barrage, reset my stacks, and just restart. Now, I probably shouldn't have cast a missile there. But I did because I wanted to start getting my mana back. Again, remember, the more mana, the more damage. And if you have 2 missile procs, then you use one until you get to 5 or 6 stacks, and then you throw it out again, and you're back to your on-top rotation. And again, guys, I'm not using even my own buff on this. This is just severely unbuffed damage, just to kind of show you guys exactly what I'm doing here. And as you can see, it's all sustained damage. That's the nice thing about Arcane, is you won't see yourself flying up the meters at the beginning. Like, you do have a little bit of burst, obviously, with your cooldown and whatnot, especially when you get your 4-piece. You will see your burst damage move up quite a bit. But what you're really looking for is not your burst damage. You're looking for your sustained damage. As long as you're doing your rotation right, you will see everybody else slowly fall down the meters, and you'll watch yourself slowly just go up. And it's because... as long as you're doing your job right and you're moving as little as possible, you know, your damage is going to go way up. What do I mean by... I showed you what I meant by management. Okay, that's when I'm 80%. So I made my numbers over here just a little bit bigger so that I can always see exactly what amount of mana I'm at. That is the biggest thing, is I always want to be watching this for Arcane. However, movement style fights, I need to know where I can be safe to stand. Like Sulong, for instance, is a terrible fight for Arcane Mages to learn. And the reason I say that is because the way that the beams work is you have to run into the beam, right? Okay, you have to reset your stacks, then you have to get back in your rune of power. This can take valuable seconds off. Do you switch to Scorch? Not if you know what you're doing. This is where you can take Blazing Speed, and you get your stacks reset, you're running back out, you're doing it extremely quickly. You get your rune set up prior. As soon as you see where the next sunbeam is, you cast your next rune where you're going to be, you get into the thing, you blink out, or you blink in, and you get out. get in and out as quick as you can and back to standing still. There's a lot of times if there's an ability that will spawn under people that you will see Arcane Mages in a different area of the pull. Now they won't be out of AoE heals, but they may be slightly left, slightly right, slightly behind the group. The reason being is just for that, is so that if something spawns, they don't need to move. Because if they need to move on the fly without being able to time their moves, they lose a ton of DPS. It's irrelevant. We are a non-movement based class. We are pretty much the worst movement based class for ranged DPS. We don't have dots to keep up besides our bomb. That's pretty much all we're keeping up. The rest of the time, it's channeling damage into a boss. I mean, we're literally just a single target freak. So that's the biggest things you need to watch out for. Is, again, knowing every fight so that you know, do I need to move for anything? If I do need to move, where's going to be the next safe place for me to go? Can I blink there? Can I blazing speed there? Is my rune ready to go so that I can spend as little time not casting as possible? That's the biggest thing, is making sure that your damage increases based on how many more arcane blasts you can get out, how many more missiles you can get out, how long you can stand still, and manage your mana. Those are the two biggest things. There has been times where I lost track of my mana and I look down and I'm like, oh crap, I'm at 70%. I should have, and then you have to recover. That's the other thing, is if you remember your priority system, you're literally, guys, during a fight, I use these 4 buttons on my target. That's all I use. Yes, I have all these other abilities, and yes, they all do have uses. But for your rotation, if you don't want to do anything besides just damage, make sure you know where your cooldowns are at. But other than that, you're literally just using your spells. Like, you're building your charges, you're keeping your mana, and then you're dropping your charges while keeping your bomb up. That's the entire thing. That's as simple as Arcane is. Where Arcane becomes tricky, again, is how well are you at managing different things. If you've played a Death Knight, a Frost Death Knight, you will actually be very, very good at an Arcane Mage, because think of the runic power management, where you never want to go to 0, but you never want to cap either. You kind of always want to stay in that nice little limbo. This is somewhat of the same thing. You're watching more of your mana bar than you are of your abilities, because you don't have that many. It's the same thing with the Frost Death Knight. You pretty much just, you've got 3 or 4 buttons that you're pretty much using with a couple different cooldowns, and that's pretty much what you're doing. The rest of the time you're watching your runic power and you're managing your runic power. It's the same idea here. You're just managing your mana and keeping it within a certain aspect. That's the tricks to playing Arcane Mage. Again, guys, if you have any other questions, though, or any other ideas, please let me know. But I want to make sure I went over everything. I went over stat weights, I went over rotation, I went over glyphs, I went over talents. I don't think I missed anything. AoE, yeah, let's talk about AoE real quick. If there's less than 4 mobs, or less than 5 mobs, so 4 or less, you're pretty much just using your single target while keeping your bomb up. That's pretty much all you're doing. If there's 5 or more, you're right in there with the melee, doing your arcane explosions. Keep your stacks up and then start doing your arcane explosions. Arcane explosion can add stacks, but it's easier to just go in there. Make sure that you're using your Frost Nova on cooldown while you're using that, because it'll crit. So that's a nice way to buff that, but literally you're spamming 1 spell. Again, guys, it's a very simple class to play. Where the mastery of the class comes in, and where you'll see certain Arcane Mages doing a ton more damage, for lack of a better word, is when you see their movement management and their mana management. Those are the 2 biggest determining factors between a good Arcane Mage and an average Arcane Mage. Hope this video helped.